Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Paper Cuts with Colleen McCullough. This is our second how-to clip for collage. So today I'm going to show you my process for cutting out all the intricate parts and pieces that I use to build a collage. So I know everyone's process is a little different and a little unique. Everyone has their favorite tools. So I'm going to show you behind the scenes of what I use every day to create a new collage. So how I start is I start with a book, magazine, anything that I find that usually it's just what's on my bookshelf, the closest to me. I pull it out and I start paging through. And what I do is I try and pretty well trust my instincts. This is something that you will develop over time. The more you collage, the easier it will be to find things that really kind of stick out to you. So things I look for: interesting areas of color, weird shapes. I tend to be drawn to movement. If there's arms in some sort of like crazy, strange wrist position or legs that look like they shouldn't bend that way, I usually really find those interesting and cut those out. I start paging through and I see something interesting. Like, for example, this lovely book of butterflies. What I'm interested in here is not only the colors on the butterfly wings that you can see, but the color behind the butterflies. So I want to make sure that I can get both of those clipped and able to kind of set aside and used once I have a little pile or a larger pile. As you can see from my collage table, sometimes it gets a little busy with clippings. So how I start is I take my X-Acto knife. I prefer to use an X-Acto knife. Some people prefer to use scissors. You can check out my review on this X-Acto blade and see kind of why I prefer this to a pair of scissors. For me, it just kind of cuts a little easier. I can get a more precise cut. I don't worry too much when I'm just getting the page out of the magazine. I just kind of try and pop it out with ease. So you can see I have now cut out just this image. It turns out there's one on the back that's quite similar. So I'm going to set this book aside. And what I want to do when I'm cutting out the butterfly from the paper is I want to make sure that I'm cutting just along the outside of the printed area that I want to keep. So in this case, it's going to be the wings that I am going to try and maintain as close as I possibly can to the edge of where the wing stops and that green background begins. It doesn't have to be super precise. You can see I kind of am giving it a little bit of an outline. I'm not going too crazy close to my hands. I'm keeping them out of the way. I'm never cutting in the direct path of a finger. That's really important for a safety tip. You don't want to lose a finger. And I'm making sure that I work my way around. I'm moving the paper as opposed to just trying to get an angle in which my hand is in the line of the X-Acto blade. And you might think, okay, so I'm cutting old paper, old magazines. So how am I gonna make sure I'm either getting through the paper enough if it's a little bit thicker paper, or how do I make sure I'm not tearing the paper? I have two tips for that. One, always make sure you have a sharp blade. Just want to make sure it's sharp. The way you can test it is just use a kind of a scrap piece of paper and cut a couple times. And if it takes you a lot of effort to get through it, I would suggest either sharpening your blade or changing your blade. This one it's a fairly new blade, so I'm not having a big issue with it. And the other thing that you need to do is make sure that underneath your paper, wherever you're cutting, is clear. So there's not tape or other clippings or anything under it, because if your blade catches on that, it'll snag it, and then it's it just kind of tears the paper, and it's kind of frustrating. And so there's that. So as we cut around the wing, you can see just as a beautiful butterfly transforms from the cocoon, a beautiful butterfly being cut out of paper. It's actually not transforming. It's just beginning to come apart You can pull it. You can kind of pull to unlock those edges. Some will be a little tighter than others. This one I'm going to go back over. So you can see this is it's pretty well out. And now we have arguably the most challenging part, which are the antennae, the butterfly antennae, which in my early days, I'd probably just avoid that and just make it a butterfly without antenna. But because you guys are the advanced class, I'm going to go ahead and show you. You can see cutting again right on the outside of that line that I want to be able to maintain the shape. I also find if you're cutting a small piece like that, cut towards the largest part of the paper that you're, the largest part of the object. So as opposed to cutting this direction where there's a lot of force on a very small tip that's going to just have a lot of pressure on its own. Like if I'm cutting this direction, then the paper will kind of be more likely to tear at this little part that's holding it together. Whereas if I go around the edge towards the larger section, it's going to keep kind of building up on its stability and structure. And as you can see, the butterfly has emerged out of its cocoon. That was really cheesy. But actually, no, it has been cut out. So this is an example of one clipping. So when I'm collaging every day, I kind of just start somewhere. Sometimes I'm kind of just not in the mood and I think, oh, what am I going to do? And then I'll see something like an interesting butterfly or I will see a beautiful landscape. And I will decide just to start cutting. So cut this out and then set it aside. And then essentially it's time to repeat that process. So you can either continue in the same book, you can set it aside, or you can, pull on a clipping you already have. I did this clipping a couple weeks ago. It's of a lovely, if I may say so myself, red pinstriped suit. A male wearing red suspenders and a red tie, matching impeccably. And so if I have something like this sitting aside, I might cut out that butterfly and say like, oh, that's interesting, and just play with the shape. I don't know if this is what's going to end up happening. Play with the way that they lay on top of each other. You can see it here as well. So once you accumulate some clippings that you have, you can start to play with the way that they look together. That, for example, is kind of pretty hideous, but you can see you're starting to get something together, and maybe it's utilizing that shape you just cut out, and then also keeping aside that negative space that you've created, which is that nice kind of teal, kind of retro, almost like aqua. So I'm going to set those aside, and then you can open up your book or magazine, your material of choice, and you can start flipping through again, and feel free to go through and grab a couple more, and then we will see you in how-to number 3, which is composition. So how to compose the collage is next. So stay tuned for that. And until then, we will see you next time. Be sure to check out all my work online. It is, as it turns out, as you've heard before, everywhere, all over. So see what you think, and check out my Patreon page. If you like what I'm doing and you want to support me, all your support is so much appreciated. And you can learn more about me and my work there at patreon.com. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye.